Hey, I'm Matt Manny. Thanks so much for joining me for today's devotional thought taken from the devotional He Still Calms Storms. Today we're looking at how to navigate life's storms. Imagine being on a massive cruise ship, far out in the ocean. You're away from land. You see miles and miles of blue, white-capped waves all around you. Now you're on the ship, you're having a great time, lots of food, the buffet is stocked, you're with family, friends, there's lots of entertainment. You take a break and you go to the railing's edge of the boat and you look out across the ocean, and in the far distance you see some storm clouds, some thunderheads, some lightning claps. What would you do? What would your first thought be? Would you think, I want to get back to shore as soon as possible? Yeah, maybe. Me too. To tell you the truth, I've never taken a cruise before. And I'd be a little nervous too. I have been out to ocean before, being far off away so you can't see land anymore. And it's really kind of unsettling a little bit when you're so far from shore. But when it comes to massive cruise ships, a 17-story cruise ship being out in the ocean, what are the protocols and procedures for going through a storm? Well, there's a couple of thoughts. When a cruise ship is facing 75-mile-an-hour winds and 30-foot tall waves, what do? Well, first of all, they check the weather. A cruise ship captain will look for potential storms to kind of get a lay of the land and take action to avoid them in the first place, to really not even have to deal with the storm. The second step, the second procedure would be this, that they would change course. Sailing around a storm is far better than having to sail through one. And so steer really wide, have a wide berth there. If they can't do that, then the next course of action would be to steer through the storm. And the goal would be this: as they face one wave after another, instead of going parallel to waves, the front of the ship, the bow, is elongated and pointed so that it can actually cut through those large, massive waves without being capsized or tipped over. The fourth procedure would be to minimize the rock and roll of the ship, of the swaying back and forth and back and forth. They actually have these wings or stabilizers they extend out of the boat to go ahead and keep the boat balanced. Then as well, the bigger the better. On a ship that is fully packed with about 4,000 passengers, luggage and cargo and supplies and even ballast tanks to fill up with water, that displacement really helps to anchor that ship in the midst of the storm. But of anything for a cruise ship going through a storm, the number one key is this: not to have an empty boat. An empty boat will easily get tossed around and capsize in a storm. In Mark's Gospel, he tells the amazing story of the disciples being in a storm while on their boat in the Sea of Galilee. The winds and waves are tossing them around. And the difference for this storm compared to other storms, though, for the disciples, they had experienced these before. The Sea of Galilee was known as the Great Abyss. There was a sense of foreboding, of this omen of sorts of don't go into the ocean, because they had known and heard of stories where people went out to sea, went to fish, went to cross the sea to travel to the other side of the lake, and they never came back. But what they had, though, was that Jesus was in their boat this time in this storm. Jesus was fast asleep in the boat, and they cry out to him and they say, Jesus, don't you care? Don't you care that we're drowning? Don't you care that we're going to perish? And Jesus' response to them, his thought is this: don't you have any faith? Where's your faith? I'm in the boat with you. I'm present with you. Our encouragement for today is this: it's in the midst of the storm where we need Jesus in our boat. And one of the greatest ways that we can acknowledge having Jesus with us is asking for wisdom. The book of James talks about in depth about the wisdom we can ask for from God. Do you need wisdom to navigate through your storm? James says this, that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, tossed to and fro like waves that are tossed about by the winds of a storm. And so the next time you're going through a storm, ask Jesus to be in your boat. Ask God for wisdom. Today's devotional thought is taken from James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. Thanks so much for watching.